So Keith, welcome back. This is our second segment here at Ore Day, but this time we're going to be talking about Mistango River Resources. And Mistango is a company that got an awful lot of attention because of us taking it over in 2020. So hopefully in 2021 we can get a lot more attention, but hopefully because of our exploration results, which we're currently drilling for as we speak, and we'll talk about that. But before we do, I think what got a lot of attention to Mistango in the first place was our proximity to Kirkland Lake Gold and its Macassa mine, which is really just one of 7 mines that has been in operation for nearly 70 years in the KL camp. So let's start off with your interpretation of the Kirkland Lake camp, that the ore body, et cetera, and obviously how that relates to what we're looking for.
Well, yeah, obviously it relates to what we're working on in the Baldwin zone right now, where we're drilling at present, because we're really in the same geological setting as the Kirkland Lake camp. It might as well be considered part of the Kirkland Lake camp, really, in my opinion. The rocks are similar, the structures are similar. What that means is this: the Kirkland Lake deposit is hosted within mainly metasedimentary rocks and also intrusive rocks, magmatic rocks that intruded into those sedimentary rocks that are generally cyanidic in composition. And where those rocks are strongly faulted, that's where you tend to find the gold deposits, either within the cyanidic rock, the sedimentary rock, or both. The sedimentary rocks were deposited just north of the Larder Cadillac structure, which is that big east-west trending structure that runs from Val-d'Or in Quebec all the way through Virginia Town, Larder Lake in Ontario, through Kirkland Lake to Matachewan. And there are lots and lots of gold mines associated with that big fault zone. The Kirkland Lake deposit is just north of that in the sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks intruded by cyanites, as I mentioned. Now, when we look at a larger scale, we see that our Baldwin zone is actually composed of the same rocks. We have the same Larder Cadillac structure. We have lots of evidence that we've determined from historical maps, but also from a recently reprocessed aeromagnetic database that we interpreted with a structural eye. We have lots of structures in there that look very similar in their arrangements to the structures in the Kirkland Lake camp. So we have sedimentary rocks intruded by cyanites with similar structures. We also have the Larder Cadillac structure and some highly deformed greenstones, metavolcanic rocks, just to the south of that and in that structure where we're drilling right now. So we have all the components for gold in the Kirkland Lake, Larder Lake, Virginia Town area. The Larder Cadillac fault zone with strongly deformed rocks, then the sedimentary basin to the north with the cyanites and lots of deformation in there. It's a great place to be. It's an excellent place to be drilling.
So want to talk a little bit more about the Macassa, and the Kirkland Lake deposit, let's call it that. As I said, it's been mined for 70 years, but what I find is interesting, they found something new not too long ago, and they call it the South Mine Complex. So various different mining companies, of course, Kirkland Lake Gold most recently, have been mining this deposit, and then all of a sudden there's something new. It's a little bit different, so it's almost been right under their nose for decades and decades, and they didn't even know it was there, which to me is exciting. So tell us about the South Mine Complex.
Well, as much as I can tell you about the South Mine Complex, because I think much about the South Mine Complex is still proprietary, but it's basically associated with, I think, this is my interpretation, I think it's sound, and I think it is one that's shared probably by Kirkland Lake Gold, but I can't speak for them, is that it's associated with a family of maybe linking structures or linking faults that links the main break fault to other faults nearby, possibly. And if so, that's not unlike the situation, again, that we see in the Baldwin zone, where we have interpreted a couple of principal families or sets of faults, as we call them, defined by different orientations that tend to intersect and cross-cut each other. And that's always a good place to be, because when you get faults intersecting and cross-cutting, you get a strong concentration of deformation. I suspect that this might be what they have happening at the South Mine Complex too, where they seem to have a complex array of fault structures. Now, if we take that and extend that to the Baldwin zone, as I said, we have, I don't want to say we have the South Mine Complex, of course, but we have a similar complex structural setting, again, with the same rock types. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned the South Mine Complex and the fact that it was only relatively recently found after Kirkland Lake and Macassa in particular have been drilled and mined and explored for decades. You know, some people might wonder, well, why do we go explore in the western part of the Kirkland Lake camp when people have been exploring there for decades and literally close to 100 years, or maybe over 100 years, because they knew there was a big deposit already in Kirkland Lake? Well, two answers to that. Well, the main answer to that is it's I think because the Kirkland Lake deposit, that fabulous world-class high-grade gold deposit, was there or is there in Kirkland Lake, nobody's attention wandered over to the Baldwin zone where we are now, at least not a whole lot of people, not big mining companies. If a mining company was exploiting something like the Kirkland Lake deposit, they didn't have a whole lot of interest in looking 4,000 meters to the west. Why would you, when you have millions and millions of ounces of high-grade gold? Baldwin has been heavily prospected. When you walk through the bush out in Baldwin, you come across lots of trenches and pits that have been dug over the last 50 or 60 years. But there hasn't been a whole lot of drilling into the subsurface. That's what we're up to now. We've reinterpreted the structure there, and we've fine-tuned it, and now we're in there drilling on good structural targets, looking for the next high-grade deposit in the Kirkland Lake camp.
So again, the theme is it's undercover again.
That is the thing, but here I don't think we need to look quite as deep, at least not initially, because there hasn't been a whole lot of deep drilling there, so there could be discoveries to be made at, say, 200 meters depth.
So let's, speaking of drilling on the Baldwin and the Kirkland West project, where exactly are we? We started in and around November, and we've been drilling ever since, so where are we in that 10,000 meter program?
Okay. So in terms of the amount of drilling we've accomplished thus far at Baldwin, we're about 2,500 meters into the 10,000 meter program. That's 7 holes, by the way. The first 9 holes in the program, so 2 more to go, are situated south of the Blanche River, where we're actually drilling into the Larder Cadillac fault zone. We're drilling into highly sheared, mainly volcanic rocks, but with cyanidic intrusive rocks in them as well. And we expect to finish up there before the end of January, and then we'll be heading north of the river into the more classic Kirkland Lake camp type geology. Assays have been a little bit slow coming back, but they're coming in now a little bit faster. Visually, by visual inspection of the drill core, we've seen some very interesting rocks, classic highly sheared mafic metavolcanic rocks with quartz carbonate veining and concentrations of pyrite. But also some what appear to be, I'm quite certain they are, extremely hydrothermally altered cyanidic dike rocks with very fine-grained disseminated pyrite in them, which is a good sign. We don't have any assays back from those rocks yet. We've just finished logging them, actually. That's from one of the very recent drill holes, I think drill hole number 5. So we'll have assays from that in 2 to 3 weeks' time. So after January, we'll be moving north of the river into the more classical Kirkland Lake type environment, where we're going to be drilling on our interpreted structural targets associated generally with cyanidic intrusive rocks as well. We're pretty excited about that. We've got we've got people out there working on the road access more or less as we speak. So we'll be ready to hit the ground running up there real soon.
Mistango River Resources is very well known, obviously, for its Kirkland West deposit. But in my opinion, I think what is overlooked is the Omega. And the truth be told, the Omega deposit, or the resource as it's known, was the original region we took an interest in Mistango River Resources. So it's got a 43101 resource, which wasn't done by us, we inherited it, but it's a fairly sizable resource. It's got decent grade. It's pretty close to surface, and it's right beside ore finders. It's right beside the Kerr Addison. So tell us a little bit about this asset, which I think is overlooked but has interesting potential.
Yeah, Omega. Has been a bit overshadowed, I think, in general in the news by Kirkland West and our drilling program at Baldwin, understandably. I like Omega. I think there's a lot of potential there. Matter of fact, I'm certain there's a lot of potential there. Most of the exploration and drilling in the past at Omega has been focused on the footprint of the mine, in the shadow of the head frame, so to speak. Makes sense. There's a historical mine. There's some mineralization left. Why not drill it off and see what kind of a resource you can make? That's been done, and there is a modest resource there. I think the real upside at Omega is going to be to explore for other ore bodies on those properties, both on the mine property, more or less proximal, within 1,000 to 2,000 meters of the mine, the historical mine, and on the southwest block of properties, which is contiguous with the mine properties, but as the name implies, off to the southwest. The larder Cadillac structure, which is the main mineralized structure in that area, and it's the one that hosts the Omega mine, also passes through the southwest block of properties. There we have slightly different. We have a slightly different geological environment, and something a little bit more akin to McGarry and Kerr Addison, for instance. And I'm quite keen to get in there. I was in the field breaking some rocks there with our geos this summer. It looks really interesting. There are some trenches. There are a few drill holes that looked good, but the exploration there never advanced very far. So we're going to get back in there and we're going to do some more drilling. That's going to be our principal target zone at Omega once we wrap up Baldwin.
When do you think we can get out there, start drilling in Omega?
I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say mid-April to early May. As soon as we wrap up Baldwin, as soon as we wrap up the Baldwin zone drilling, we're going to head out to Omega.
So Keith, before I let you go, I want to ask you about something that's always been very interesting to me, and I'll give you my opinion on it. First, we've got the Macassa, which is, Kirkland Lake's famous gold mine. And then, of course, we've got the Kerr Addison, which is about 30 kilometers to the east. It's certainly our view that there is the potential for other mines, if not world-class discoveries, either in and around each of those mines or between. But it's my understanding that there are different styles of mineralization. So how is it that you have two world-class mines that were in operation for decades, very, very high grade, but they're different? What's your thoughts on that?
Why they're different? Well, in fact, it's not all that surprising. If you back off just a little bit and look at a larger scale picture, well, the large scale, like you just mentioned, 30, 40 kilometer scale from Kirkland Lake all the way to Virginia Town, where Kerr Addison is located. The number one sort of large scale controlling factor for whether you're going to develop gold deposits or not in the shallow crust has to do with the source region for the gold, which is way down deep in the crust, or maybe even into the mantle under the crust. And what the deposit is going to look like once it's formed depends on a number of things. Whatever, the mineralizing fluids that work their way up through the crust are going to form deposits if they hit the right kind of traps, as we call them. They might be structural, they might be chemical, they might be a combination of both, where the fluids react with the surrounding rocks, for instance. That's a chemical trap. If there are structures that can channel those fluids that go into one type of rock or into another type of rock, either in the larder Cadillac structure or proximal to it in another structure, those fluids will get there, and if they find the right environment, they'll form a gold deposit. And it will look different because it's being formed in different types of rocks by slightly different processes. Sometimes it's just a structural trap, a fault that opens up and traps some fluid in there that deposits gold. Other times the fault channels the fluids into a rock with which it reacts chemically and deposits gold. So you end up with different looking things, like Kerr Addison being hosted in metavolcanic rocks with two very classically well-known types of mineralization, green carbonate and flow ore. And in Kirkland Lake, you have more a very narrow veins associated with sheared, with rather brittle faulting, okay, very narrow zones. Well, relatively narrow zones on the order of a meter or so in thickness, or a few meters. So it's not that surprising. The fluids probably come from the same place originally, but what the deposit looks like depends on where those fluids end up.
Okay. Well, look, Keith, that's a great explanation, and I really appreciate your time, and I know our investors do as well. So thank you very much for participating here.
Pleasure.
With Ore Day, with Mistango, with Ore Finders. Now we got our fingers crossed for 2021.
We certainly do. We're doing more than crossing our fingers. We're working like mad.
There you go. I like that.
Okay.